Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2023. And that brings us to a release which is a re-release of a film which currently exists in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog at spine number 764, but this time on the occasion of this year, 2023, Criterion is re-releasing this title using the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray format option. And I'm speaking of the work which is described as being from the year 1991. And the name of the filmmaker is Terry Gilliam. And the name of the work is The Fisher King. This is the work from the year 1991, and it is from the director, the one, the only, Mr. Terry Gilliam, producer Deborah Hill and Linda Obst, and written by Richard Logravenese. And it has a wonderful cast, truly brilliant cast, included in which are Jeff Bridges and Mercedes Ruehl and Amanda Plummer and Robin Williams and others. Oh, what a great cast this is, and a great film, a wonderful, epic, intimate, magnificent, and fantastic and scary and funny and tragic and oh so human and humane and dramatic film all at once. This is the work which is The Fisher King. The Criterion Collection is re-releasing this film on the occasion of this year 2023, this time using the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo format. We will speak a little bit about those details later on in this video discussion. But before we get to that, my dear friends, let us talk, you and I, a little bit about the story structure or plot of this film. And I think if we were to try to endeavor to discuss the plot or story structure of this great film, The Fisher King, we could focus in on our characters. Jack, the Jeff Bridges character, who is at the outset of the film, we understand working as a type of radio host, known as a shock jock, because he is very provocative as a type of radio host provocateur, in saying things that are very controversial, very outlandish, that create a stir, that cause quite a bit of bite or venom in the air. And indeed, perhaps, this may have something to do with certain very sudden and tragic and very violent events that happen, which lead to a huge crisis, in a manner of speaking, in the context of Jack's life, Jeff Bridges' character's life, such that we find him a little bit later in the course of the film pretty much down and out, fallen off the grid, in a manner of speaking. And he seems to either be trying to cope with this critical mass crisis that has occurred, or maybe he's trying to evade or escape responsibility or attention, or he might not even be emotionally equipped to handle the grave nature of what has indeed happened early on in the film. In any event, for much of the film, we find him pretty much down and out, both emotionally and perhaps physically and spiritually. But in this state, we see him in the context of, we should also mention, it's taking place in New York. The setting and environment of New York City forms not just the feel and tenor and atmosphere of the setting, but also it in many ways creates a type of character backdrop. Itself becomes its own character in New York City. For many reasons, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But before we do, returning to the character of Jeff Bridges, we see a number of his relationships that form part of the key aspect of the emotional core of this film, one of which is the relationship that he has with the Mercedes Ruehl character, that's Anne, played with such wit and grace and charm and a type of real-life assured nature that's also it's down to earth, and it's very individualized, and also so spirited and so wonderful. Mercedes Ruehl's performance is so wonderful as Anne, and her relationship and her hopes and dreams in the context of what she is doing, and also in the context of her relationship with Jack. That also forms the basis of the emotional core that draws us, the viewer, in, and we see maybe or maybe not just how connected or unconnected the case may be. Jack is with Anne on an emotional level, and we see how that might, say, figure into the overall context of Jack's own adventure, and indeed Anne's own adventure. If anything, this film could be described as being about the adventures of our characters, or the misadventures of our characters. And in that context, we should also mention that not only do we have the emotional core provided by the relationship, the intimate relationship between Anne and Jack, but also the relationship between Perry and Jack. And Perry is, of course, the character portrayed by the one, the only Robin Williams. And Robin Williams' character, we see he is in his own set of circumstances. He is homeless. He also is apparently on a quest trying to find the Holy Grail. And we see also throughout the film the connection that is being forged between Jack and Perry. And perhaps put another way, we also understand that maybe their connection runs deep, and perhaps much deeper than initially meets the eye. And perhaps there is much more of a spiritual, soulful connection between the two of them than they might initially realize. But in any event, due to these circumstances, both hidden and revealed, we understand thus that Jack becomes very compelled to try to see to it that the missions and the accomplishments and the dreams, or the missions and the dreams and aspirations of his dear friend Perry, Robin Williams' character, become fulfilled and become achieved. And I say missions and aspirations, using those words in the plural form, because there are indeed many such missions or aspirations on the part of Perry, not just the quest for the Holy Grail, but also perhaps an attempt at making an emotional connection with another character that is very important, that being portrayed by Amanda Plummer. The character is Lydia, and we understand that Robin Williams' character is very much enamored by this woman that he sees, but it's very hard for him to meet her. But this also forms the basis for Jack and indeed Anne's attempts at trying to create this emotional connection between their friend Perry and this woman that he sees. This is Amanda Plummer's character, and that also forms another a source of the soulful or spiritual or emotional root connection. The soul of the film, if you will, or part of the soul of the film, if you will, formed by yet another very important key human relationship, that between Perry and Lydia. And indeed, that also forms the basis between the relationship between Lydia and Anne and Jack, and indeed Jack and Perry. So it all comes full circle, it's all interconnected, and we understand that, taking a step back, this is a film that is about human relationships and wants and needs and desires and hopes and aspirations, and indeed missions and journeys and quests. And those quests and those adventures or misadventures, I think, are leveled in this film in such a way that can be said to be very on a type of fantastic, or a very ethereal or otherworldly type of adventurous spirit. And therein lies a lot of the quest for the Holy Grail language and speak, the way in which the environment of New York is used and warped and perhaps even elevated to a sense of a type of fantastical or an otherworldly type of experience that is linked to, or that may or not be, linked to a sense of quote unquote madness, or quote unquote a sense of hysteria, or perhaps the idea of a way in which the world is being viewed by certain characters that might be perceived by others to be quote unquote mad or quote unquote insane. But is the insane really insane? Is the mad truly mad? Or is indeed the mad more sane than one might realize? And therein, I think, lies a wonderful way in which the Terry Gilliam aesthetic enters into this world. He is able to use his very magical touch to show us things that, from one perspective, might seem to be quote-unquote mad, but from another perspective, the same thing is indeed earnest and honest and true. And that, I think, is a great way to describe the Fisher King, which is it's about things and aspects of human nature that, from one perspective, from a certain point of view, might be seen as quote-unquote mad. But from another perspective, you just take a little step in this direction, looking at it from the same thing from a different vantage point, and you realize that that same thing is full of heart. It is full of a beating heart that is humane and true and honest and earnest and sincere. And I think that type of transformation from the one perspective to another could be said to be the overarching journey of our characters, including Anne, including Lydia, including Perry, and including Jack, the Jeff Bridges character. Their vision or their journey from seeing certain aspects from the vantage point of being mad or aloof, and then slowly transforming that vantage point and then seeing the world through the eyes of the honest and earnest and sincere, and the human emotional connections that are made as a result of that, or perhaps during the course of that, from a certain point of view. And so therein lies, I think, the way in which the Terry Gilliam aesthetic of flights of fancy, the whimsical, poetical nature that seeps into the world almost at random, at a wonderful, delicious sense of the random. The way in which the visionary quest and the heightened metaphor becomes so heightened and so epic and majestic that we realize in this wonderful paradoxical way that the epic and majestic metaphor is indeed more solemn and more directly relevant to the human experience. Thus creating or bridging the gap between that which is strictly speaking metaphor and that which is strictly speaking a direct comment on the human condition. So indeed, the metaphorical and the directness are mapped together in a way that is interconnected. And that is, I think, the brilliance of Terry Gilliam and company, the way in which they are able to apply metaphor in this way that is fantastical and glorious and, lush and over the top in a brilliant way, and still manage to map out the human heart that is so direct and full and honest and so emotional indeed. And it is all down to that lovely touch, the special effects. This is a film that is also about special effects. This is a film that's also about looking at environments that are warped and skewed and perhaps stretched out in a way that becomes itself out of this world. But that stretching out is also a means by which we can look at things from different vantage points, just like our characters, looking at things from different vantage points, looking at relationships from different points of view, seeing and viewing people from different points of view, and seeing not just other people, but seeing ourselves from different points of view. And through that process, through that journey, through that quest, dare I say, we find some kind of connection with others and connections deep down within our own hearts. And so I think that is forming the basis for that which is so dramatic and so human at the very heart and soul of this wonderful film, which is The Fisher King. I really love this film, and it's a film that it was released in the early 90s, so it came out during this time when I too was slowly beginning to discover the magic of cinema, and it was a very, in many ways, it was a very accessible entry point into the world of Terry Gilliam, and at the same time, it provided, it thus provided me with an entry point into that world on the one hand, and also the great scope and a type of fantasy vision that was also populated by or decorated by things which felt so accessible and so real, which I love that balance, and I love that almost lovely pastiche quality, using the aspects of reality in this patchwork manner. to tell the story, which I thought is so Terry Gilliam and the like. And so and then I mentioned the performances too, and the performances create the groundwork for the human relationships, which, as I say, are at the very core of this film. The success of this film rests on the truly moving nature of these relationships. So Mercedes Ruehl's performance, Amanda Plummer's performance, so real and honest, and love those idiosyncratic details to their characters, which is so lovely. And then Robin Williams, that great way in which he can just freely express himself, and yet in that moment of free self-expression be so totally out there, naked and vulnerable, and leaving his heart open to be either wounded or accepted, as the case may be, throughout the course of the drama unfolding in the course of the film The Fisher King. And then Jeff Bridges, who provides this great arc. He has this way of portraying aspects of his character which could be said to be quite cold and maybe even villainous. And yet there is, even in that sense of the quote-unquote bad guy nature of his character, as it might seem, there is a way in which we can always keep a grasp on his humanity. We can, maybe it might not necessarily be the case that we understand everything that he does, but we can at least follow with our hearts the trajectory in which he goes, and the choices that he makes, and the denials that he makes. And perhaps we might not always be there with all of his choices, but we are definitely with him in spirit. And I think that is thanks in large part, which is acknowledged by Terry Gilliam and others here, thanks in a large primary part to the great three-dimensionality that is bestowed upon the character by virtue of the great performance by Jeff Bridges. Oh, it's a truly great performance. It's a great performance in an ensemble of wonderful performances that ground this film, that give it that extra level of multi-dimensionality that I think catapult it to the stratosphere in many ways. I mean, this is a film that has so many heights of majesty and epicness that is also filled with a lot of heart and intimate emotional moments that are, has some special effects sequences that are really quite out of this world, and at the same time there are moments of two characters in a room, or two characters just laying down in a park just talking, and that also has its form of magic. So magic comes in so many forms, and that's what makes this film as magical and special and great as it is. This is the work which is The Fisher King. The Criterion Collection has released this film, The Fisher King, this year. Re-released it, I should say, at spine number 764. And I say re-released because The Fisher King this year is released by Criterion on this 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo format, which means it has two discs, one being the 4K disc and the other being the Blu-ray disc. I'm sorry, I opened this up. On this side of the plastic inner casing compartment, you'll find the fold-out, the poster fold-out, and I've removed it for purposes of today's video discussion, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. This is the new release. What I have in my hand here is the older Blu-ray release, which is from the year 2015, and I open it up, and you have the disc, the Blu-ray only disc, housed inside this earlier release. But this year, 2023, we have this new re-release, and this new re-release is also based upon the restoration. And let me now take a moment to read a little bit from the fold-out poster of this, and the fold-out poster looks like this, and on the back of such fold-out poster we have a lot of interesting writings and write-ups, among which is a section on which is called About the Restoration. And let me read from that, and I quote, "The Fisher King is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1. It was restored in 4K resolution by Sony Pictures Entertainment. The 4K wet gate scan of the 35mm original camera negative was done by Cineric Inc. in New York. Digital image restoration was done by Prasad in Burbank, California. Color grading was done by Sherry Eisenberg at Roundabout Entertainment in Santa Monica, California. Audio restoration and conform of the 5.1 surround soundtrack which was mixed from 35mm LCRS DME stems in 2009, was done by Deluxe Audio in Hollywood. The restoration was supervised by Rita Belda for Sony Pictures Entertainment with color approval by director Terry Gilliam. On the 4K Ultra HD disc, the feature is presented in Dolby Vision HDR High Dynamic Range. On the Blu-ray, it is presented in High Definition SDR Standard Dynamic Range. So this is some notes about the restoration for this year. So I should point out that, yes, I've seen this film a number of times, and also on the previous Blu-ray release from Criterion several years back. And I should point out, too, that, yes, in terms of the aspect ratio, the previous Blu-ray described the aspect ratio as being 1.78 to 1. And now we have the aspect ratio being described at 1.85 to 1 aspect ratio. So that's one maybe minute but not insignificant change or difference that's noted. I should also point out that, again, I am perhaps primarily used to watching the film on the previous Criterion Blu-ray, which I thought and still think is really quite standout in terms of the look and sound of the film. But that being said, I am so very, very happy with the way that the 4K looked on the 4K player. I noticed that there were certain lines, how should I put it? Again, I'm so very inept when it comes to technical description, so I apologize. So I can only use my very, very simplistic and non-technical ways of describing it, again, based on my subjective experience. But if I were to try to give an example, I mean, you can tell little things like just the way that the faces are the lit faces look in sort of nighttime scenes. There are a lot of scenes, for instance, that take place in nighttime in the dim moonlight, and I think those scenes are, while they're so well served on, say, the Blu-ray earlier release. On the 4K, there is a type of pronouncement. I don't know how best to explain it, but there's a type of pronouncement in the air. You can make out certain features, and that warmth of touch, I think, adds to the intimate nature, because not that it wasn't there in the earlier Blu-ray presentation, but there's something about the way that you can see examples like that really show the depth of the emotion that's taking place in those scenes. I mean, again, a lot of the emotional core is the relationship between these characters. And a lot of those emotional heartbeats occur during these scenes between two characters at night as they're walking on the street or they're in the park or something like that. And so you have moments like those that really, really shine. And really shine in the 4K presentation. I was so thrilled with how that looked. And while at the same time, it didn't feel like it was totally cleaned up. How should I put it? It still felt like it was back in the early 90s era. I don't know how to explain that as well, except there's a type of haze or shimmer that is also preserved, which I feel like is part of almost the mist or the air that you can feel when you see the outdoor scenes of New York, for example. And you can feel that also when the scenes then suddenly turn into a sense of a type of fantasy or vision, that mist or haze that is almost imperceptible, but it feels like you can feel it or smell it, as it were. And you can get a sense of the air when you see the way in which the light and contours are pronounced in the way it looks in 4K. Again, not that you didn't get that with the Blu-ray experience, but there are those little feelings that I think make it all the more pronounced, and thus make it shine all the more. And so in those ways, while I'm not disappointed with how it had looked on, say, the previous Blu-ray experience, I am so happy with how this looks and sounds in this 4K presentation, such that, again, for me, it might seem like this might be another example of what is the difference between getting the earlier Blu-ray versus getting the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo, especially when we are reminded, and I'll talk about this later, we're not getting anything new in terms of supplements. But is it worth it? And so I would say, again, sometimes with some Criterion releases, maybe the answer is yes, maybe the answer is we're not sure. For me personally, I would say, for the Fisher King, it's worth it. If you're going to get the Blu-ray only version, that's great. You're going to get a great version. But I'm very glad I have the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray comp, because I think for me the 4K UHD disc will be my go-to disc whenever I revisit this. It was again just I felt so much. It was so touching, again, with those details that further enhanced that emotional experience I was having. So I'm very, very impressed and pleased with this indeed. And again, for this title anyway, for this re-release, whenever Criterion re-releases a title but using the 4K UHD format, is it worth it? For me, I think it is, for the Fisher King. So there is just my comments on that. And then continuing on with the discussion of the Fisher King release or re-release, as I mentioned before, the earlier Blu-ray was released by Criterion. The first printing here is described as being from 2015. So some years ago, it was and is a great release. And one of the reasons for that being the supplements and the commentary. Now, for this new re-release of the Criterion Fisher King, in this year 2023, we're getting, I understand, the same supplements and the same commentary track. So nothing new in that department. But what we got before was great. And so what we got before, which was great, is what we're getting now, which is also great. So it's the same stuff, but what we're getting is still wonderful. So what are we getting? First up, we're getting the commentary track, which is with Terry Gilliam. And this commentary track is wonderful. You know, I think one of the aspects of watching a Terry Gilliam film is hearing about the process of making the film from Terry Gilliam himself, because more often than not, a Terry Gilliam film, as great and brilliant as it is on screen, there's so much behind the scenes and production details, and perhaps, yes, maybe depending on the film you're talking about, production chaos that is part of the lore, that's part of the myth of the film. And I think part of that process is so key, or our discussion of that process is so key when talking about the Fisher King. And so we get Terry Gilliam's perspective, both on what's on screen versus what's behind the screen. And so we have, from his point of view, the idea about themes that he wanted to interweave, the idea about the media and manipulation by the media, and his attitude towards the media, and how it has a type of almost negative, isolating aspect in the context of the Jeff Bridges character. Hermetically sealed is a phrase that he uses. And he also talks about working with Jeff Bridges. And again, I made note of how his character might be seen in some instances to be almost morally corrupt, or perhaps even villainous. And I think Terry Gilliam speaks to this aspect of the negative nature of the Jack character, but at the same time, in the hands of Jeff Bridges, who is, again, in Terry Gilliam's words, almost has a type of all-American appeal about him. You cannot help but like a Jeff Bridges character because of the human qualities and the humane aspects that he naturally gives and bestows to his characters. I think that really helps to form the humane and human basis of the Jack character. And Terry Gilliam makes note of this really astutely in the commentary track. Not only does he speak, though, about Jeff Bridges' performance, he speaks about Mercedes Ruehl and how Mercedes Ruehl had so much expertise on the lore and legend and background of the Fisher King. She wrote and studied this and sort of worked on a college thesis on the Fisher King, and so she really had the background down. And also her performance, there's a way in which she's able to inject a type of almost idiosyncratic, quirky nature that is always respecting the heart and respecting the core of the character. And there's a certain scene, for example, I love, which is we see Mercedes Ruehl and talking. And we think she's talking to someone, but in fact, when we pull back, we realize that the situation is wholly different. But we never lose sight, even when the illusion is broken. We never lose sight of the human quality and the core of what her character is going through at that particular moment, which is a kind of crisis moment for her. So Oh, what a great performance. And Terry Gilliam, I think very rightly, bestows a type of respect. And also some interesting anecdotal stories about her working on the set with many of the other actors, including Robin Williams. And he speaks here about Robin Williams and the type of outlandish, free-for-all, free-form nature of Robin Williams' performance and the introduction of his character. And there are certain key sequences involving Robin Williams' almost free nature, but that also he never loses sight of the sort of sensitivities that are, I think, very key and crucial in forming the character that he forms, which is again, it's just it's Robin Williams' career. Is filled with a lot of highlights. One of which is very definitely the Fisher King. That's not all, too, because we also have Amanda Plummer spoken about by Terry Gilliam here. And I love how Terry Gilliam, he speaks about the casting process, and perhaps Amanda Plummer wasn't necessarily the first, the top choice on the list, but she was ultimately chosen, and my goodness, what a great choice it was, and he acknowledges as well. There's a type of ethereal beauty which is so necessary for the character of Lydia. And there are also these moments where it's just so quirky, the choices that are made that just make the character all the more alive. Little things like moments where maybe the camera lingers a bit just to capture those moments. There's a scene between Amanda Plummer and Mercedes Ruehl where the camera just lingers just a little bit, a few extra seconds after their dialogue is ended, and just you capture a really lovely, quirky moment by Amanda Plummer that further highlights the real down to earth, living nature that is her performance, her character. And speaking of which, Terry Gilliam makes mention of things like New York, the setting of New York, the ups and downs of New York, the heights and lows of New York. And this is very important too, heights and lows, the vertical nature, climbing, people looking up or not looking up, and how he is able to identify actual works of architecture in the landscape of New York that really served the film, and not even the producers or the screenwriter realized this at the time, but he did. So that it's a Terry Gilliam touch. Speaking of which, Terry Gilliam also mentioned that he was in essence a type of director for hire for this work, and when he was hired, he had of course had a number of very almost chaotic experiences with other film productions, and so maybe he was hesitant to bring what might be called the Terry Gilliam touch to this work, where he was essentially a director for hire. But that was something that was encouraged by the producers and the writer. In fact, they wanted him to bring more of the Terry Gilliam touch, and so he brings this to our attention when he talks about the genesis of something like the Grand Central Station sequence, or sequences involving what's known as the Red Knight, for example. So, which can be described definitely as bringing a type of mystical or almost a type of special effects, almost homemade special effects feel to it that has that Terry Gilliam touch to it. That again, he was almost hesitant to bring because he didn't want to bring that to the table when he was first hired. But in fact, that's what people were wanting, and it was a brilliant choice. And I say director for hire, but I know that phrase maybe has a connotation sometimes of a negative quality, but I don't mean that in a negative way at all, because we also understand that in many ways, the choice of Terry Gilliam was the choice, and the producers acknowledge this, and some of the other supplements, the screenwriter acknowledges, and indeed Terry Gilliam, the way that he speaks about this film in the commentary track, you know that he knows this film and he knows the characters through and through. So this is a great commentary track. Oh, he also speaks too about certain aspects of not just capturing the landscape of the city, but a landscape of the faces, New York, etc., and also the landscape of faces a la Sergio Leone, for example. So, oh my goodness. And the idea of the Holy Grail itself, too. So these and other reasons, it's great to have this commentary track once again. We had it before, and we have it now again. So here is your chance. If you haven't seen the film with the commentary track, you're in for a treat indeed. So this is the commentary track with Terry Gilliam. And then let's continue on with a discussion of the supplements. So before I continue, I should point out that this is the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray The 4K UHD is on this orange disc, and then the Blu-ray is on the blue disc. You have the film, which can be found on the 4K UHD disc and also on the Blu-ray disc. And the commentary track, which I've just spoken about, can be found also on both discs. But then when we're talking about the supplements can be found on the Blu-ray disc. And so let us turn to what the supplements are. The supplements, again, are those which were found on the earlier release from several years back, but we have them here again, and they were great before, and they are great now. So what do we have in store for us in terms of the supplements to be found on the Blu-ray disc of this 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo release? So first up, we have a section which is deleted scenes. And this is a total 6 deleted scenes in total, and with the option of a commentary as well. So it's great to have these deleted scenes. I don't want to go into too much detail about them because I don't want to spoil the surprises, especially for those who haven't seen the film yet. So, of course, watch the film first, and then you can watch these deleted scenes. But I think what's so great about the deleted scenes, and let me just be just very general about it here, is they are further enhancements into the world and lives of these characters, to the point where they are just extensions of things that we find ourselves wondering about and seeing in the film itself. So I love this about this. So it feels, these feel like great extensions, and that I think is a testament to the way in which the characters are so well rendered. And to see these wonderful, not just curiosities, but these wonderful little snippets in the form of these deleted scenes. Oh, it's so worthwhile. Plus plus other insights as well. So that's the first section here, which is the deleted scenes section. Please check it out if you can. And that's not all, because then we have a documentary. It's a two-part documentary of sorts. It's called The Tale of the Fisher King. And first up is The Fool and the Wounded King. And next is The Real and the Fantastical. So total is about an hour. And so we have the two parts, which are approximately 30 minutes each. So the first part, The Fool and the Wounded King, is talking about really the genesis of the film, the making of, well, not the making of, the creation of the story and the film from the vantage point of producer Linda Obst and Richard Gravenese, and essentially his idea or conception of the writing of the film, and also Linda Obst talking about how she wanted to really bring this to the screen in her own, in a way that was, from her vantage point, true and faithful to the screenwriter's vision. And so for her, and also working with fellow producer Deborah Hill, these details come into play here. And also there are some comments here about the sort of inspiration or the aspects of the Fisher King, and also the Holy Grail, T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland, that is all provided by Mercedes Ruehl, who was, as mentioned by Terry Gilliam in the commentary track, really studied this as a student. So and sort of the idea of myth and legend, Arthurian legend, and how this forms a level of the film, which I think adds to the sense of quote-unquote fantasy, but also a sense of quest or myth or journey or a discovery, which is, again, at the very heart and soul of each of the characters. Each character is, in a sense, on their own quest. And so to link that to myth and legend, as the film does, and we get the sense of that, the roots of that in the discussion here, which is really great. And also discussions regarding Amanda Plummer and Jeff Bridges as a type of humorous buddy story, love story, and also the screenwriter talks about his Italian-American background and how that informs a lot of how a lot of the characters were created based on his screenwriting, based on his own lived-in experiences. And also the search for a director. James Cameron was mentioned a little bit here, but ultimately the directing responsibilities fell upon Terry Gilliam. And now that we see the film, everyone realizes and understands that Terry Gilliam was the perfect choice from the very get-go, especially what he has shown in terms of his filmography prior to The Fisher King and what he shows indeed throughout the course of The Fisher King. So this, I think, forms the background for the first component of this two-part documentary. So it's essentially the build-up to the production, leading to the cast and crew being assembled. So very, very It's very enlightening indeed. And then it talks about too. Going into other aspects of say casting, Robin Williams, and Jeff Bridges, etc. And then going into the second part of the documentary, or the second part, we're getting into a lot of the details about the casting dynamics and also what they bring to the role. Their professional on-set relationship with Terry Gilliam, and again, making reference to Jeff Bridges, why he was chosen, his work in previous films like say The Fabulous Baker Boys, how he brought it almost a kind of quote-unquote bad boy image, but that was also had a kind of all-American appeal about him. It was very likable, which is again a very important component of the success of the characterization of Jack, and also finding the character in terms of the costume design. Robin Williams' costume design is made mention here as well. Some very key sequences, like, as I mentioned, the Grand Central station sequence that has an almost magical feel that's lifted out of reality into a whole different world, it seems, and the like. So these and other reasons, I think, are what make this a great example of making of documentaries on Criterion releases at their very best. So this is a truly great two-parter, about an hour in total. You're getting so much. And indeed, too, part of the, I should mention again, part of the discovery and journey of works of Terry Gilliam is the information about what happened behind the scenes. And so we get a lot of that behind-the-scenes stuff, a lot of that... especially in the first part of this two-parter, a lot of the power negotiations and the executive meetings and the like, and the choices, and how the producers needed to make certain concessions on the one hand, but also stand their ground on the other. And so that type of business meeting intrigue, as it were, that's forming part of the basis for the myth and legend and chaos that is a Terry Gilliam film. But I think that's very important too, because we realize that while in some instances in Terry Gilliam's filmography it might have been very chaotic indeed, Adventures of Baron Munchausen comes to mind, which he himself acknowledges. There are other instances where, relatively speaking, it could be said to be a really wholly productive and positive experience. And it seems like, for all intents and purposes, that's how the Fisher King production history is being portrayed, at least in the context of these supplements. So, not that it was wholly smooth sailing, but there was a lot of issues as well, but relatively speaking. So this is, again, forming a very key component in the making of the discussion of any Terry Gilliam film, and you see a great sense of that discussion in this documentary. So please check it out, or this two-parter. So please check it out if you can, if you haven't already. That's not all, because then we have a supplement which is called Tale of the Red Knight, and this is with Keith Greco and Vincent Jeffords, and this is approximately 22 minutes. And this is about the Red Knight, the creation of the Red Knight, which is a very key image and a very key special effect, costume and makeup design, special effect, stunt work, special effect, that is part of the vision or imagery, almost the fantasy imagery, especially in the context of the Robin Williams character, and especially in the context of the Fisher King and legend and the quest. And here we have a discussion, or almost a look back in the components of what made the Red Knight, the physicality of the Red Knight, the costuming, and what survived in terms of the archives, and also the technical challenges are discussed between the two, in terms of workshopping this, in terms of trying to get the red color down, trying to work with the costume, because you had to work with a stuntman on a horse that was costumed and had to move around and had to work on location, and the costume was very brittle and frail and had to be repaired every time. The stuntman, here's Chris Howell, and there's also scenes that were very physical and had to, and very, but was also having to deal with the elements, etc. So, and they describe it themselves in terms of technical challenges in the early 90s, where this was pretty much the dawn of sort of computer special effects. It was around the corner, of course, but here was a film that wasn't employing that, and so a lot of it had to be, it had to be practical. And so realizing those challenges and describing the process, seeing some test footage as well, which is really great. So it gets a key component. It's a very Terry Gilliam approach and aesthetic quality. And we get the discussion, a full body discussion of all the challenges. And you really get a sense of all the challenges that were involved in the creation of the Red Knight here. What a great supplement. We find, again, it was in the earlier Blu-ray release, but it's now here as well. So The Tale of the Red Knight, approximately 22 minutes. And that's not all, because then we get Jeff's Tale, and this is Jeff Bridges, and Jeff Bridges is also, he's also a photographer. And he had his wide lux camera, which is a type of taking wide framed pictures, and he's able to show us in this 11-minute or so supplement a photo book that he made for the photos that he had on. And this is so lovely. Jeff Bridges showing a different side of his artistic talents, and also showing a very intimate, almost behind-the-scenes photos display of the making of the Fisher King. So here's a lovely, lovely corner of the supplements here. This is Jeff's Tale, approximately 11 minutes. And that's not all in terms of Jeff Bridges, because we have another supplement, this time called Jeff and Jack. This is approximately 20 minutes. And here we have Jeff Bridges' character being a radio DJ, a shock jock. And here he has a little bit of explanation as to what that entailed. Plus we have, and we understand he worked with Stephen Bridgewater. And here we have some footage in terms of the preparation. So he's actually working in the room and just essentially warming up his character, working with call-ins and certain things, certain scenarios that is essentially meant for him to try to find the radio DJ shock jock character that is Jack. So there are various videotape sessions that are also shown here. So it's sort of the actor method at work here in trying to find that shock jock personality. And it's very important too, because again, that's the persona of Jack, which we see either transformed or changed or perhaps remaining the same depending on the situation throughout the course of this film. So Jeff and Jack, this is great, approximately 20 minutes. And that's not all, because then we have Robin's Tale. This is approximately 19 minutes. This is an interview described as being from 2006 with Robin Williams himself. And so Robin Williams, of course, is a key part of the success of The Fisher King. And here he talks about, for instance, his reaction to the script. He talks about things like the laughter, Terry Gilliam's laughter, and how it had that wonderful, almost affectionate, infectious quality to it. That's just so, and you get a sense of that in a lot of the behind the scenes. And there's a little clip of Terry Gilliam's laughter here as well. And then also Robin Williams talks about shooting in New York City, the idea of the costume and look of his character Perry. There's a certain scene involving filming in Central Park, and he lets himself go in many aspects. So he talks about that part of his performance as well as an example of his great performance. Also working with the other actors, Mercedes Ruehl, Amanda Plummer, and Jeff Bridges, and the like. Oh, this is so great. So Robin Williams, so missed. And this, for many reasons, and this interview is another reminder of why he is so missed, and just how critical and crucial his contribution is. It's one of the key performances of this. I mean, the film it rests in many ways on his shoulders, and he delivers and then some. And you get a sense of the reason why he was attached to the project from the very get-go. Such a great interview. Robin's Tale, approximately 19 minutes. Please check it out if you haven't already. And then the supplements continue on with the costume tests, 3-minute costume tests. So again, the costumes are very important. They have their own characters, so we get a sense of that here in the costume test supplement, which is also great. And then the supplement, which is focusing on trailers, 3 domestic trailers and 2 international trailers as well. So it's a great jam-packed trailer section as well. And that rounds out the wonderful supplements. Once again, we don't get anything new for purposes of this new 2023 release, but everything that we got before is carried over, and what we got before was great, so therefore what we're getting this year is great. Please check those out if you haven't already. And so now let's talk about the aesthetics, the look, the cover art design, and the insert and the essay, etc. So I've mentioned this before. There's the insert, which has this wonderful sort of poster thing here. Excuse me, I maybe I'm not doing it justice by showing it in this way, but there we go. It's a great poster fold out. I'm not a fan of the poster fold out per se, but I don't want to take anything away. That is the great aesthetic quality of this. This is really cool. And indeed, the aesthetic quality is carried over into the cover art design, which was part of the earlier cover art for The Fisher King. Let me say that the art is art director Sarah Habibi, Eric Skillman, illustrators LA2 designer Eric Skillman. And so I love this wonderful, this kind of, how should I put it? This almost graffiti-like quality, which I think is very apropos and has a sense of the feeling of the city in a manner of speaking, and almost the handmade quality of this work. And I mean that very, very affectionately and very positively. And that, I think, is very much part of the wonderful, true visionary style of Terry Gilliam. I love it. I love it very much. And I should say that has a carryover into this poster art, which is again covering two the key characters, Jeff Bridges and Robin Williams. Again, I'm not a fan of the fold out or the poster format per se. I much rather have the staple booklet form, but it is what it is. But also for what it is, I'm very impressed indeed. So and also the writing, the back, it has this type of swirling effect, on the side of the on the border here. We have the credits, the cast and crew credits. So it might be difficult to read for some people, but I find it very creative. It's really nice to have that way of looking at the cast and credits. And then also we have special thanks and acknowledgements production credits this way, and you have to turn it the other way to look at the about the restoration. And then the essay is here. The Bilge Ebiri essay is really great. It's called In the Kingdom of the Imperfect. So I'm a fan of Bilge Ebiri's work. And here is a great example of that. This essay is top-notch. In the Kingdom of the Imperfect is top-notch. My strong recommendation, as always, is to first check out the film. And after you've seen the film, please read the essay. It does go into a little bit of detail, goes into a little bit of spoilers about that. But as soon as you have seen the film, please check out the wonderful essay, the Bilge Ebiri essay. It's truly, truly worth it. I'm very, very happy that it was carried over. This essay or this style, it is what we saw in the earlier Blu-ray release. The earlier Blu-ray release, by the way, this is the earlier Blu-ray release's fold-out. And as you can see, the fold-out itself, it does have the same kind of quality to it. The only difference perhaps being that I can tell is the section about the transfer from the earlier Blu-ray release is this, but now we have the restoration details that are part of the new 2023 fold-out. But that section seems to be rewritten. But apart from that, all of the details seem to be the same, or very, very similar indeed. So again, I would have loved to have seen a staple booklet, but c'est la vie, but not just c'est la vie. I cannot complain in the slightest because, again, what we're getting is very creative and very much, I think, in the keeping with the aesthetic and the feel and spirit and atmosphere of the film, which is so well captured, I think, overall in this Criterion release of The Fisher King for purposes of 2023. So we have another Terry Gilliam film re-released, this time, once again, like earlier in the year with The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. I have another Terry Gilliam film using the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray combo format. And I think here with this re-release of The Fisher King, I am very, very impressed indeed. Once again, I love the Blu-ray release. And so for those who are opting for the Blu-ray release, you are in good hands with that from Criterion. That being said, I think for me personally, I am so happy with the 4K that for me, I think the 4K will be my go-to whenever I revisit this film. And my goodness, what a film this is. What a film this is. What a lovely, brilliant, majestic film. So emotional, so full of heart. I love this film so much. This is the work directed by Terry Gilliam, which is The Fisher King. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great, great movies, including The the Fisher King. So until, and indeed other films by Terry Gilliam, and indeed other films in the Criterion Collection and beyond, my dear friends. So until the next video, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.